Alright, so one example I want to demonstrate in a video is kind of how I approach pistol handles. And so we'll just press X and delete this cube, and we'll just look at things from the front. Since I have HOPSCutter up already, instead of inserting a plane, we're just going to press D and switch over to End Gun. And we're just going to draw a shape out. Maybe something like that. And all done. And we could just extrude it out. And in order to get this centered, I'm just going to press Shift S, selection of cursor, or it should be origin to cursor, but whatever, we'll just Alt G, place it back in the center. And let's just grab this face, and we're just going to press SX0, just make sure it's flat. Perform an extrusion, and then perform one more extrusion. And this will give us the space that we need in here, where we can Control R and place an edge loop, and Control B to split that. And I'm just going to grab this piece and just extrude it down a couple of times, and we'll bring this over and extrude it, actually penetrating this shape completely. And we don't actually need to circumnavigate the form, so we're just going to terminate this loop early and just get rid of it altogether. So, you know, we have the geometry where we need in order to create this piece, and we see that this piece is just extruded into this where there's nothing else to do. So we'll just press K, C to constrain it, and just cut here to basically extend this area. And let's actually grab this whole face at the bottom, and let's use the ST multi-tool, which is brought up by shift-clicking Mark. You can just jump into the multi-tool. And we're just going to press B to bevel with a spacer bevel without having to deal with the real bevel. And from here, now we can grab this edge and actually perform a bevel. And we can see that things get a little bit awry with this particular bevel. So it's like, how will we get this under control? And also, do we want to promote things to bevel immediately? The answer is probably no. This is going to require a very fat sausage hand in order to handle. So let's actually bring that back, and let's Alt X symmetrize just to bring that in. You know, I actually think we can bring it in a little bit more and resymmetrize once again. And so now let's select our edge, and we're just going to perform a bevel. But we see that there's something terminating it early, so we want to get rid of any excess geometry that's going to cause issues. So just grabbing an edge and pressing Control X will purify it. Also, we could take this time to create an alignment point. So under mesh tools, we're just going to choose align view and just roll the wheel until we are aligned to the face how we want. Press E to drop an empty, and let's go ahead and try that bevel again. In fact, let's flip that around. I guess I was right the first time with just this edge. So this is why aligning to view can be such a pain. And now I select the edge, even though I cannot see anything. Let's just create another view and rotate it, and we can actually just look at this from the side. It's the only way to bring sanity to such a situation. In this view, let's change our alignment to view, G, X. And we want to make sure that we're snapping to vertex. And now it's aligned. So we can get rid of our second view. We don't need it anymore. It's just a little bit of a heads up for us there. And let's actually deal with the back as well. If we beveled it, we would be making a big mistake in the type of handheld we're making. So let's actually put an edge loop and then extrude this out flatly on the global, and just SX0 in order to flatten it. And now we have this rounded area happening in the back of our handheld. And so I'm just going to grab this, bevel it in order to round it, and we could just grab this entire edge flow and then prepare to bevel it, giving us a much nicer result. However, we're still too early in this, so I'll place a loop here, And we'll just grab this piece and just pop it out. Maybe grab this and slide it back. We can grab both of these and just perform a nice bevel. Just round that out as bevel can do. And then we can actually select this entire loop and perform this bevel, resulting in a nice rounded contoured form, more readily able to handle a human hand. So let's Alt X and mirror this. And we'll just grab this loop, bring this back. Grab these two loops, also dissolve them. By dissolving them, we can deal with them cleanly. So, first we'll dissolve this one, and then, or not dissolve, bevel, and we'll grab this one and also perform a bevel to just get that to fit. So now the moment we've all been waiting for. So with this area, we actually want it to connect with the geometry and not just be penetrating inside vaguely. So I'm just going to grow my selection with Control Numpad plus. And with this selected, we're just going to press Control Alt Numpad plus in order to perform a Boolean union. So in the event that you did not have you had a mirror modifier present, this won't work out for you. But since this is a complete manifold mesh, we're able to perform a kind of in-tool Boolean connection, which can be assistive for things just like this. So now this piece is connected, it's integrated with the geometry. When you're here, your family, like the Olive Garden. So we're just giving this a nice connection in order to be properly unified. And we can drop another edge loop here and just slide that back, join that with J. Of course, my hotkeys are being displayed, so my goal is always to say less about hotkeys and to just talk about the work at hand. There's plenty of beginner tutorials talking about that. So looks like Blender crashed because I was talking smack. So let's test out that autosave, shall we? Click on File, we choose Recover, we recover our autosave, and we bring it up again, and that was kind of weird, but we're back up in the club. As we can see, not a lot of progress was lost, but enough to annoy me if that happens again. So let's save this as handheld demo. I don't have power save enabled because this is a scene based off of setting myself completely up from scratch. And let's just symmetrize that again. We could start working with a mirror modifier whenever I get tired of doing that, but sometimes it's nice to just have the most minimal amount of geometry and have control delegated to yourself manually. Another thing that we also want to look at here is the configuration of the trigger area. We could actually do ourselves a favor and just box cut all of this out. I know we did so much work for it, and just see how that would look. And it looks like air. We must be catching such a hot line. And now we're looking at our result of what it would look like if we just cerebral board the trigger out. So I was just thinking it would be nicer if this was more in a box shape, just in general, not even talking about in terms of shortcuts. So let's look at our modifier stack. One modifier, let's just apply that. We don't want any nonsense. Let's press Alt H and really look at this. We see that some of these areas are no longer needed. However, to hold this, we will need to make some decisions. In fact, 1, 2, 3. Actually, 1, 2, 3. Let's dissolve those all to this point. 1, 2, 3. At last. Alright, and that looks like it will actually suffice. So sometimes Booleans will allow you to get a very simple result. That's one of the things I love about BMesh is it is relatively controllable. However, there are some rules about hotlining that are very strict, but every Boolean system has rules, and so it's important that you spend time playing with them with basic shapes just to get a grasp of it, because people always come in with their own expectations of what they want Blender to be. Like, hey, this should be just like Max, or is it just like AutoCAD? It's like, no, it's like free, you know. But I don't mean that so much in the bad sense. I mean it in the there's just a lot of things everywhere, and there's a lot of understandings, you know, like with the tools, because they all come from different places. Not even talking about our own tools, just talking about Blender now. But you know, the way Blender's put together requires a bit of an understanding of the people behind it, I feel, in order to get the true experience. Like, I guess you could come into Blender and have a good time playing with Sculpt, but in my opinion, if you have a little bit of understanding about Pablo and his endeavors with Sculpt and his victories, it makes it all the more sweeter to experience his work and follow it and whatnot. So here we are looking at our you know, kind of handheld pistol shape, you know, not going for a direct pew but just something kind of in the vein of, you know, me. And we'll go ahead and promote this to a weighted normal, just because I feel like we're at a stage that we could begin progressing forward. However, by progressing forward, we will need to figure out what size finger is going to be getting inserted into this. And also, we want to make this much shorter. So 11 minutes in, and we're already looking at a pretty nice result. In fact, we can just grab these edges and dissolve them. And I'm probably supposed to be using a space mouse for this, but old habits die hard. I was using a mouse earlier and I was like, wow, I just kill it with the mouse. Can't wait till I'm this good with a space mouse, but I'll have to keep practicing with it. We're going to mark it with sharp, but we want to go into control tilde and make sure crease and seam is on, so that whenever we have it, we can just select a top area with L. And from here, just shift clicking will turn a selection into a plate. So we're just going to plate that off, and we're going to control A, apply that, run a sharpen again to make this mesh real. Shift to extract off of this, and let's begin doing some interesting cuts. So, well, cuts slash bevels. So we want to dissolve that edge. It's going to be a little rubbish getting in our way, but you can kind of see what I'm going for here with this handheld. It's kind of a mechanized scraper of sorts. You know, this one isn't so much for killing. It's built to just scrape you real good, you know. Sometimes robots need a good scraping. Maybe it's like a janitorial bot. So let's grab these two and we'll just bevel them. And let's bring down our box, press B. And we could also bring that bowl back and connect it with this piece as well. And notice that sometimes I'm using booleans with HardOps, and it's saying on the screen that I'm using exact. And that will come back to haunt me when things get slow. Also, who knows, it could also be related to crashing. But if you're not crashing, you're not doing it right. A little crash never hurt nobody. But definitely set your autosave down to a minute at all times, just in case you don't want to lose your work. But sometimes even autosave will mess with you if you have multiple blenders open. So for times where you need even more backup, there's autosave. So we're just going to wedge this area, do a little transformation to adjust the wedge. We could also draw a wedge here. Alright, for a second there I had to pull it, felt like a mile to get my wedge to show, but it could also be the auto smooth settings. And this is where we're at so far. You know, I just wanted to build something real simple in order to keep this video somewhat brief, while I could just be going in for hours and hours on this model until the stage I finally add decals and the model's just looking beautiful and impressive. You know, my favorite part, might I add. Let's extrude this through. For some reason my mesh disappeared. We're just going to pretend we didn't see that. I say that all the time with the people I work with internally. I'll be showcasing a product, and you know, we'll see a bug, and I'll just you know, just be a moment of silence, right? And I'll just say something like, "We're just gonna pretend I didn't see that, all right?" Because you know, normally that comes with a task and a, "Hey, can we check into that?" You know, and that always comes with work and time. So I'm always mindful of everyone's time and try to work everyone to a break point instead of continuing on and on, because it's kind of cruel to work it like a mine, you know. But there's always work to be done. That's my motto, especially when it comes to HOPSCutter. Like, there's people in the past who have told me, you know, I think I'm gonna check back on hops when it's done. I just stopped talking to those people. Not even joking. It's like, you're gonna be waiting a long time. Like, what are you waiting for me to convince you by version 9.8.4.7? Get out of here. The choice is yours. Make it up, but don't don't tell me about your indecision, because it's not gonna help. It's just disheartening. It's like, what are you trying to demotivate me? It's important that we keep going. So if you're on the fence, just do it. It's getting better and better. That's our promise to you. Everything's getting better. I mean, I'm always looking forward to what's coming up in the future, because the grid taper stuff was kind of a byproduct of HOPSCutter's congruency updates working out so well. But there's other things that are slated to come up in the future that are actually complete, but they're just such massive changes that we just got to hold off for a moment. We're like adding additional shapes and stuff like that. We want users to become acquainted with the shapes that we have. And so all the time I get messages like, wow, I had no idea you could wedge. It's like, yeah, that's been around for a while, but it's no fault of them. We just have to work better at presenting these things and getting them in front of the user and making it highlightable, I guess. You know, hot new object wedge in the menu, you know, would probably do it. But that sounds a little bit like Fortnite, right? But every release is an event to us. In fact, right now, over the course of this video, I'm receiving a phone call. Alright, I get distracted by a phone call, but now I'm back in the game. So where was I? So, oh yeah, I was talking about my love of the Big Bang Theory. So I'm literally out of shows to watch. So I decided I'm just going to watch shows that are fictional universes in which black people don't exist. So that's where Big Bang Theory comes in. I think over the course of watching that show, I've like found one black person in that show. Not saying I'm like a black watcher or anything, but just a funny observation watching the show. Also, it is quite funny. I might buy a Sheldon shirt after I finish the marathon of binging the show. Also, you know, what's up on those PlayStations, right? Just popping off on the prices. People will write me and be like, hey, I found a PlayStation, it's $1,000. Like, well, F that. On principle alone, can't let the scalpers win. Unless they got GPUs. That's another story. But whenever it comes to PlayStations, nah, they don't have, they only have like 800 gigs of memory. That will be filled up so fast. What am I rushing into? By the time that scalpers get dealt with, there'll be a PlayStation 5 Pro. So this area is a curiosity, and I bet it's because the wedge is just a little bit too close. There we go. Just lowering the auto smooth will do it. And auto smooth is something I'm a little bit more mindful of now, because I see that users are really not aware of how fast I adjust that auto smooth sometimes by just pressing Q and shift clicking sharpen to just adjust the auto smooth anytime the shading looks bad, to just lower it a little bit more and a little bit more depending on what angle I'm working at. You know, at first I kind of considered it a downside of the angle-based workflow, but I've become quite used to it. So here's a moment where line box is just a gem. You know, sometimes I forget about line box, but the situations in which line box is required are never forgotten. In fact, we'll press W, turn wedge off, just zone out and do a few little cuts, and it always results in a really interesting result. However, the downside is every one of these little cuts, unless they have a guidance edge happening, we will have to come back and deal with that. And we could see that most things actually do have a guidance edge, surprisingly. Here's an area that doesn't. I mean, we could let our bevel get skewed by these things, which I was talking about in a previous video about Welcome to Vox City. Here's another area that would just be skewed, and we could actually solve that on a cutter level by just finding the original Ingon, and let's just jump to box, press Control X to jump to knife, and now we've actually cut an edge flow that the Boolean is giving that this extra shape is then playing off of later in the timeline. For this area, let's say we actually wanted to clean that up. This is our shape. We will just draw a box, and voila. So I have put in so many complaints about knife box and getting it to work at the level that we need it to. So all the videos where you see it working and it just works, just know that in the background of that was a lot of me saying, hey, this situation is unacceptable, this situation is unacceptable, this situation is unacceptable, this situation is unacceptable. Seriously. I always have to stop myself and remember to reminisce on all the moments of achievement, because sometimes I feel like you know, all I do is complain, and I mean, my job is to complain. If I run out of complaints, then everyone's job's over, and this whole dream ends. But as long as there's imperfections in the milk, there's always more work to be done. And anyone who will try to sell you on the idea of this being a finished idea, one and done, no need for ever future revision, I would just say that they may not know Blender that well, because Blender is going to evolve on you, and if what you're doing is worth anything, they're going to evolve to meet you, and you're going to need to evolve to either remain ahead or be assistive to the process of being acclimated or assimilated into the board. But either way, Blender will take heed of you. I saw a post on Dev Talk where they're talking about adding a parallax occlusion shader to Blender itself. You know, I've done seen it all, Bobby. Anyways, really excited about that. That made my day to see. Shout out to Link. Link's always Lincoln. And we're just trying to get the cuts that are out of there and trade it for the cuts that are here. Maybe we can come solve that later, but who's going to be looking up inside the handle there, you know? In fact, we can bring that shape back again and begin talking about how we're going to deal with the trigger, how wide the trigger needs to be. So let's actually take this shape and just shift click on Shade Solid and just sleep at night knowing that Shade Solid works perfectly. We'll set the location to the default in the center of our scene, and then we'll set our location back to the object itself through the set origin to geometry. Jesus, you're working without snapping pies. Life is going to be hard for you. Blender should definitely do something about that, eh? So we're just scaling this up. And let's just extrude this out forward. And every time I do a handle or any of these handhelds, I always try to change my workflow up a little bit, you know, just to be weird. You know, never do it the same. Even on a rehearsal, I'll rehearse something 100 times and then in the video just start just going off the script left and right. So if I had an operator, you know, they'd call me out. But it's just me. Always got to go off script on everything. So I'm just bringing this in and just beveling it in order to round it out, similar to what we discussed earlier. Shift click sharpen and roll the wheel in. We could just grab these two pieces, extrude them out. Alt X, symmetry. Bring those down. Just looking at it and thinking about how weird I can get in real time. You're almost looking at my thinking process at this moment. Alright, we'll adjust our sharpening just to, or our auto smoothing just to get it to behave better. Continuously running symmetry just to keep this model in a state of manifoldness while also keeping symmetry. We'll just symmetrize it again to keep it symmetry. And let's talk about this area. So there's a couple of things we could do. We could dissolve this edge, and we could dissolve these two edges. And what this means is that if we bevel, we can get a result like this on the bottom. Of course, the geometry is going to get a little trashy, but if we look at the top though, geometry is of course very bad, but M at last, Shift R, and Shift R. And that's actually a more acceptable result. And we look in this area and we will press M, merge at last, merge at last, merge at last. And I think we're done talking about merging at last. So next is to remark this area sharp, give it a symmetry, and let's we can select this and Control Shift click sharpen to recalculate sharps altogether for this, which will remove any pre-made sharps and recalculate them. One of the classics, resharp, was one of the oldest hops features of the very first version, cutting room floor, meaning it didn't make it into an official version. But the version that you're seeing now is almost like a prophecy being fulfilled. So sometimes people wonder where ideas come from. A lot of ideas still being integrated are also from the past. Like there's a lot of things from the cutting room floor that were just ideas that I know that I wanted to experiment with at the time, but just didn't have time to get put in a version, or I just wanted to relent on driving poor AR crazy, because I did used to drive him crazy. With my requests. It's like, oh man, you know, this is great. However, I realize it's regrettable. Can we remove it? Proxy's a lot more flexible with that. I do enjoy working with him on that respect, because I hit him with that all the time. I'm like, even though I made you go through this work, I realized it was a bad idea. Can we put it on a toggle and turn that toggle off and not talk about it anymore? Sometimes it happens, but we remain committed to giving people the best out-of-box experience. So, oh man, now I'm getting text messages. You won't believe this, but I just got to pay my phone bill. It was $200. I received like 6 phone calls last month. I think I'm snap cursor just selected, and let's go to object and choose set origin to 3D cursor. God, that is painful. Yeah, I think we'll get pies in here immediately. And I don't know, I've just been putting holes and handles, I don't know. That way it swings through the air whenever you're pistol whipping people, I guess. You know, you put like some recorder pieces in here, and we're just cutting circles all the way through, still deviating from examples that were shown previous. Let me respond to my watch real quick. Alright, so finally back to work. Live in the studio, we got Apple the cat just looking at me. So that means I gotta do even better, or else she'll just leave. However, even if I do really good, she'll still just leave. So, you know, sometimes while looking at a model and the recording's paused, I'll just take a moment and deliberate possible paths. So, oh god, the cat left me. This is the monologuing. Monologuing did it. Alright, continuing on. So, we're not distracted, losing our core audience. I assume mainly cats are watching my channel. And we see that everything is so far so good. I just love cutting these little ticks into things. My goal is to cut 1 million of them in order to figure out exactly where they go. You know, I look at everything like a kind of leveling system of study. So repetition builds habits, and deviation will allow experimentation. But you know, only by pushing yourself can you truly grow, of course. So we're just doing our cut, but we want to first press X and make it red. And we want to press W and make it a wedge. And there we go, just making our wedge. And just know internally, I'm still saying, hey guys, I feel that we can make wedge even easier. It's like, but this is wedge V2. I'm like, I know, but I got this idea. But it's all in the people who help bring it together. So we're just looking at our shape, vroom, vroom, vroom. It's kind of sad the cat left us, but we will live. And so for this area, easiest way to cut it would be to draw a line box and then hold Alt, which I just love, by the way. We'll left mouse right click in order to pause it, and we'll place it right about here. And just bring that up, adjust our sharpening via the auto smooth modal, which is my favorite way to adjust our auto smooth. I should say that adjusting the auto smooth, that's probably confusing people as well. What I'm saying is inaccurate. Another thing is, you know, let's take the entire trim rim around this out. At the very beginning of, you know, this whole installation, I had you guys enable edit tools, and that's because, or I should have, let's bring up our preferences, and I believe it's called edit mesh tools. And if we right click, we have an option here called offset edges. And in the F9 of offsetting edges, we can choose how far we want this to be offset. And let's bring our width in just a tad. We don't want to get too crazy with it. And let's separate that. And this piece has a whole bunch of modifiers on it. That's not going to do. Let's get rid of that. And we will just fill this in using the power of F2. Another one of those Blender greats that just can't be competed with. And I mean in any other software. I would not be able to model anywhere else due to F2 alone in Blender. Just saying. We'll mark these, which should now crease it as well. And that means that if we sharpen it, that we now have this piece that's a little bit more rounded than before. So we could leave it all bumpy, but this is a prime piece, and this is a really important cut to everyone. So let's perform a slash. And all of our shading just went so bad. I wonder if it was because of this shape having a normal on it somehow. So somehow we let that happen. So let's just get rid of that. And now we're one moment while I respond to a message requiring my attention. Alright, so continuing on, this area also looks a little rough, so I'm going to edit mode and just perform a knife cut and press Z to cut through the mesh. And that should at least mitigate the shading issues to at least be in this quadrant while we just slide a couple of pieces out of harm's way. Maybe even rethink them and dissolve them just to minimize the amount of cleanup that will have to be done there. And we can begin drawing our shape for this cutout. And gone working pretty nice, no complaints there. Let's go to line box again, and once again we're going to do a double extended bow box. And sometimes I trip out on the speed of knife intersect, but this is something that I expect will improve as Blender goes on. Of course, we're always at the mercy of the greatness that is Blender, and the fact that we're even working live is something that wasn't even possible 10 decimals ago. You know, everyone was working in 2D then, until 3D changed everything. But it was all thanks to Blender becoming much more robust with their Boolean system. So in a way, these tools are like a benchmark of Blender itself. You know, if you ever wondered how powerful Blender is, you know, just look at their add-on development, because all those ideas are possible only through what Blender allows us. There's so much that we wish we could do that we wish Blender would allow us even more capabilities with, like custom modifiers and such. But Blender is a crafty devil. You got to be imaginative when it comes to Blender, because the path that you want isn't always directly clear, but it is always somewhat possible. And I feel with these new nodes coming up that our dreams of making custom modifiers will be a dream as well, and maybe we'll be able to have an entire box city just contained within just a single modifier, and you'll be able to have your work saved as modifiers that you'll be able to give to other people, you know, as they work. All I can do is just imagine what the future would hold. And for some reason I'm still a knife like a weirdo, and we're just going to draw another cut. This is my favorite cut to do, even though I currently want a restrictive version. So you see how it bows out on all axes. I would actually wouldn't mind a version that bowed out on certain axes. So fingers crossed. Everything always starts off as a dream until it's reality, and then it's taken for granted, you darn youngins. But let's just draw our box, press W. And I probably should have also started off using AccuScale and working to scale, but there's always reasons for not doing that when it comes to Blender. I've discovered very recently, you know, when you're working at the centimeters from meters, just gets so painful. So definitely see some paths that are going to need to be worked on, but task coming to a person near you. So continuing on, just performing some subcuts on the areas that we cut out. Also, having bevels on this shape probably was the best idea. So let's go into the bevel helper and just turn bevel off, which we didn't have to do it that way. Just, I always like to go through the myriad of ways that it's possible to do things and experiment with them. But the bevel Boolean helper is definitely one of my favorites. So with this area, we're just going to remove the back, and looking at it from the top, we're just going to do an end-on cut to do the equivalent of a wedge, because there's always an easier way to do something. You know, we could look at something from an angle and just cut it like so, and we're still just moving through this model really fast. Another thing is we may want to perform a cut here and just separate out everything up top, which will give us all of this. But you know, inside every separation there's a chance for a legend to be made in the form of angular cuts. And then anytime there's a point, I will always just try to break that point and turn it into a flat, just because I know that bevels will bleed if you give them too many points. There's also one right there, but we'll let that one live just so we can make a lesson out of it later. The next thing is I'm going to press D, switch to Ngon again, And this area is just begging to be removed. And by removed, I mean made into a sub piece. Let's scroll down to line box. And we see how it bows out on the bottom side. That's the part that I want changed. If it only popped out on just the X and the Y, it would just be so much more robust. But, you know, I'm always interested in the next level of what these tools can be. So, you know, in a way, testing them is just as important, because that's where, you know, the next ideas come from. So anytime that we're fully quiet of all the bugs that happen with Macs, you know, that was the whole point of the 7.17.8 update, was to fix Mac computers. Again, because sometimes a daemon will return. You know, with this piece, let's examine our options. Let's press Control A, Visual Geometry to Mesh, and we will just put a loop and Control R, bevel it. And we could just select loops, boundary loop, which isn't mapped to Shift tilde in this particular Blender configuration. That's life. I could just right click it and do that, but we'll just slide that down. Maybe slide that one up. And just round these out. Just having some fun. We may darn well regret that later. But for now, we're just living. Earlier I was playing with a little bit of cutting action as well, and the thought occurred to me that, you know, view align is just so underrated. Whenever it comes to doing things like mechs and robots and things of a more detailed nature, there's no other friend you would want by your side than view align. And, you know, earlier I was doing some cuts and, you know, surface was just not working for me. But aligning the view and performing the cuts and then just getting back in there and just adjusting the depth later on. And also I could see that that wasn't going to work. It was just too detailed for its area, and I want to bring it back again. Maybe just adjust that one. And, oh God, that's not what I meant to do. Shift click sharpen, and we just roll the wheel down, and there we go. So now we're back in control. So the next thing is always like cutting out, you know, little divots. So we could just press B, press X. That is not enough bevel segments. Let's do that again. We press B, we roll the wheel, we press X, that's enough. Let's look at this from top view. We want to grab Ngon and just perform one of these on both sides. And then from here we can just draw a box, press V, and Shift R to reset. And just rolling the wheel. We're just adding some segments. One of the internal complaints I have is the speed of 2D versus 3D, and things being unneedingly slow when they don't have to be, especially in a state where we're not even penetrating the mesh. But it's because of the order that the modifiers are set up, and that the modifiers are set up the moment you begin doing transformation. But just know that every single cut, I am there. I'm there just judging it harshly, just saying, hey, how can this be better? This has to be better. It has to be better. And for no other reasons than it could be better. I always tell everyone, you know, we're our own ghost racers. We compete with ourselves. We're trying to make a better version of what we did last time. Doesn't matter about anything else. Just do our best. It will usually do the job. Especially with us, you know, we'll tag out, tag in. You get tired, we'll pass that task on. But the task isn't dying. So here we are looking at things in top view once again. my favorite way to just work into a surface. And there's not really a lot to even narrate with this because it's just the same stuff, just box. You know, another thing I like doing is just adding a box, cutting a wedge, and then just scaling it. So easy. No wonder it's #1. Referencing American Online. But here we are, looking at our shape. And, you know, every time I look at it from the front, this piece right here is freaking hideous. So let's do something about that. We want to slide it, but we want to perform a knife cut here, which will give us a little bit of area, but we want to bevel that, so then we can really just push this in, and we get something like that. And then we can play off of this by giving it some negative space. Maybe turn off wedge for this. Hell, look at what wedge has given us. Wedge, you're in the gang now. Wedge gets to stay. Except with laser cut, we don't have wedge support, and that's for a good reason. I found that users were probably going to run into cases where if they laser cut without being aware of wedge, they would end up with very negative results, and it would just cause a support issue cascade. Sometimes we make last minute calls just to dial something back. It's like, oh, you know, we've been testing it so long that we're used to it, but users aren't going to be able to get used to it so fast. So with this area, I'm just going to cut a circle through the bowl shape itself, which actually should have... Let's try that again. Let's actually bring up the wedge. The wedge is the progenitor of everything. And then we perform it, and we see that it almost worked out, except we have to bring back that particular boolean. And there's a box cut that's coming through it that's just cutting that whole thing short. So that's fine. We could just switch over to circle itself, stop being lazy, use object, and just pop that over to the other side. It doesn't even matter that we're exceeding it because everything after the mirror is just getting cut off. And, you know, we're just going to be weird today. We're going to put 2 circles, right? And those exact booleans I was talking about earlier, they're going to come back to haunt you. And they're even haunting me on this i9 system, but that is life. And, you know, sometimes I'm just like, hey, let's fight through that pain. Let's do this. Exact boolean. Give me your worst. What are you gonna do? Send me to my desktop? Fine. Got a nice picture there. Be fine. Be right back in the game. For this one, you know, we probably want to... Let's think about this. Alright, so we're like putting down robots, right? So that means we want to play off of this point. Bring out one of these numbers. Mirror to the other side. Maybe take it internal. We could put a loop here. Alt click on EM macro in order to push this out. Bring that out. E. Bring it in. Another thing we could also do is go in the box and just draw a box and press A to make and just see what kind of make box we were given. And that's going to need to be sent up to the labs right there. Directly to the top. Why did that make box do it? I'm kidding. That's a popular talk that we have right now. Hey, why did this make box do this? And it always comes down to, oh, you must have had extrude them. And, you know, my response is, hey, couldn't have been extruding. It's in 2D view. However, we do need to add 2D. Extrusion is the point of that whole tirade. So here we are cutting it using fast, and that did not work out. So let's select the object and go under our Boolean helper and change this to be fast. Nope. Exact. Maybe it does look right. Okay, it came out correct. I was just misreading it. So because we have this shape, we can play off of it to a greater degree, like so. And we got the same thing happening to the other side. And you know, if we look at this from top view, we can go in Incon and we could sketch a secondary piece to be assistive in this piece's particular operation. And with laser cut, we just get just an automatic depth, but that's fine. And I even offshot it like we did, just so that way I could dissolve it and eventually grab this piece and vert snap it to make it congruent, because I just didn't want to bother with using grid at that moment, even though it's just a button click away. Alright, and so, you know, I always love playing with boxy shapes because they look so boring, right? And the mystery is like, how do you get rid of that boring look to it? I mean, you can just go in and, of course, begin subtracting areas like you see me doing. And a lot of the tools that we've added are kind of our answers to how we would propose you get rid of that blocky look of your models. So, you know, wedge is one of them. Custom cutter is another, where we could use this object as a custom cutter on itself and get a pretty interesting result. Press C and just cut the object using itself. And I always say, you know, this thing never disappoints as a tool. It always guarantees something interesting, but it's definitely our most random, and it was on the list forever as something that we would have done if certain parties returned. So glad to finally have box cutter, having custom cutter, all part of Proxy's great return, but can't be more proud of his work as it continues to shine inside of box cutter. So let's continue on. We'll just put an array on this, press A and V in order to array, and let's actually take this moment to how do we want to do this? Well, I hate that snap menu, guys, just saying. So we're just going to bring in empty, and we're just going to add a mirror and just mirror it below this empty by pressing A to add mirror whenever you're adding a mirror. And we'll just take that back. And as far as this area goes, we want to do something cool that the other pipes write home about, something like that. And then we can finally array it. And this is where we're looking at so far on our kind of robotic taser device. And so I'll press QOT and we'll put a box on top of it. And we'll just bring it out, bevel it, press 1, you know, maybe select it all and just Alt-S push it. And we could shift click to put a glass around it, so that way this area remains electrified. Let's also go in Hops tool and let's just bring in a spring. The spring is something I don't talk about enough. However, this thing is cool and deserves this moment to shine. However, I have to Shift S, cursor to selected, Shift S, selection to cursor, and we'll just scale it to fit. And just using Control, we'll just grab some of these hops dots and begin making adjustments. The first dot I grabbed was regrettable, but notice I didn't bother undoing, so that may be my undoing later. But for now, let's continue. Let's also mirror this to the other side using the empty, just continue on continuously letting it work for us. And we're just looking at what we got going on here. I'm going to press QOT, and we see that we don't yet have the ability to to shape using an unmirrored area, which was something that the previous one could do. So there's always more work to be done, but just one of those things that you know, if you were really paying attention to the first one, you probably noticed it's absent in the second one, but we will be doubling back for that. In fact, I'm always saying that there is such a amount of backlog work for us to be doubling back for as far as cleaning up and optimization, but for now, let's just survive. I mean, the pandemic, I mean. So I now added a blank material, and we can grab some. Let's actually just select everything and just control click on manage, and that will evict everything that's literal garbage and not needed for the render. And this is what our results is looking like so far. So let's shift click on let's select an object and shift click material scroll to just roll through combinations that could be for our device that we've made. Alright, here we go. Oh no, what I was so indecisive for. We could also press Alt VV, find the right look dev environment to present this. However, in this setup, we have like 4 environments that are built in the Blender, so we don't have a whole lot to work with. So let's select a handle, give it a blank material. We can select this thing, give it material 2 as well, and just selecting random parts and just assigning them a secondary material. Also, we want to put a weight normal on that. Also, this area could possibly go entirely dark. And we're just kind of looking at our color blocking here. I accidentally went into texture toggle. Let's select these 2 pieces, give them their own blank material, and these colors that they're giving me are quote unquote questionable. I mean, not even questionable like you think, questionable like can't tell them apart. So let's take this in edit mode. I'm just going to use L to select some boundaries. And we go under material, hit it with the blank material just to assign it. Notice that the cuts cut in the original material. Just one of those Blender isms you gotta love. Make those purple. Make these material 3. So now we have a little bit of variation happening with our objects and their materials. And also we'll give this one material 3. Let's take a look at it in our render. And the backdrop just be distracting. So we're just cycling through, just finding the right presentation for it. Probably something like that. We press R, and now that's been set to the render. And now we can press Alt VB and begin talking about blank light setups. So without anything else showing in the scene, it's a little hard to see. So let's place a plane at the base and also give it a blank material. And this can serve as our world. Alright. And this is what we're looking at so far. One of the things I don't like is how up close it just looks so strange on the perspective. Maybe something like that to present it a little better. And let's go to frame 1 and just get this in a good vantage point, and we press Q and add camera. And normally if the 3D cursor was in the center, it would have positioned our camera just right, but instead we're just adjusting the empty just a little bit, and then of course selecting the camera to set its focal length to 110, and we can just scale that up. And this is what happens whenever we let it play back. However, I got like 10 FPS, so we're gonna need to find out about that. But at this point, now we can begin progressing this towards the final level. So I'll save it as 1 and 1, and let's increment it to 1 and 2, and we'll save that. And so Let's select this piece and control click bevel, and we see that it missed an area. Let's alt scroll to roll backwards, and notice the difference between whenever you catch that angle just right and whenever you don't. So now that area has been beveled. However, this side has been compromised terribly, and really we need to look no further than the cutter. We never calculated the normals, and so as a result it just gave us a bad rap there. So for this piece, let's also put a bevel on it, but we also want to give it a weighted normal, and that's already looking better. Let's look at this piece. We'll control click bevel, give it a slight bevel, also make sure it has a weighted normal. And so with this piece, let's also do the same. So, you know, if we were working destructively, we would be using something called C-sharpen. However, the work of dealing with bevel has been promoted to bevel itself because it just seemed like it would make more sense for new users. However, this was probably one of our more controversial decisions. However, we do stand by it, and now it's been status quo for months and months now, so there's really no way we can actually go back. But just know that adding a bevel is just as easy as control clicking bevel to add a new bevel. And I'm just pressing 1 to adjust the auto smooth because it's no longer needed to have the auto smooth handle shading. We can let the additional segments being given by the bevel hold the shading together now. So doing the same thing in the back, alt clicking, maybe twice just to make sure. And we'll do the same thing here, but let's take a look at this area. We see that wedges require a little bit tighter of a bevel. So, you know, with every cut, I'm always thinking about how it's going to be on the promotion to bevel stage. Like, that cut is going to be costly on the promotion stage. It's going to result in a tighter form because of that choice. And so let's deal with this area. This one is the worst one to promote to a bevel. And I told you, worst area. And let's see why it's the worst. Because of this one, no, not that one. That one's pretty crucial. But let's get rid of some of this unneeded geometry. Oops, did not mean to jump into HOPSCutter there. And we're just looking at what's going on with our geometry, wondering why the bevel had to go so wrong here. And this is, I think, one of the things that me and Howard were talking about recently that he looks forward to solving in Blender someday, is bevel's ability to handle this particular area, because the solution truly is to grab these two, merge them at last, maybe dissolve these a bit up the chain. Actually, let's put them back. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, one of them has to go. So we could either take this thing and slide it away from the center. And this is only whenever you have these convergence points like this. So we could slide all the way into center. So let's turn on auto merge and try that. And the further we get away, the more rounded it is. So now we actually have a satisfactory result. However, we do want to look at the Boolean here. We want to look at that one, look at that one, and I'm just rolling until I get the right ones. I could also use Hops tool, where I just press Alt W and just hover for a dot. In fact, I think I got both the things I'm looking for. Sorry about that. And now this area has been promoted to bevel as well. However, that trigger, ooh, always a battle. But there's a learning experience in attempting to solve these things as well. So it's always recommended. So let's play with this area. Alt click sharpen. So far so good. And let's look at it from camera view. And this is now our final result. So with the final bevel, things definitely have a lot more pop happening with the edges. And when we play it back through the render, we see that, you know, it doesn't look so bad. We'll pause it right here on this nice vantage point and turn off visualization. So that way we can take this moment and just look at this shape and see what's going on. And this is the result of this video. So with that, I will wrap this up. I'll see you guys next time.